Illinois, a quiet suburb about 40 miles west of Chicago, tree-lined streets, close-knit neighborhoods, and the kind of place where families feel safe letting their kids walk to school. But in May of 2011, that sense of safety was shattered. A 6-year-old boy named Timmothy Pitzen was dropped off at school one morning and was never seen again. What followed was a desperate search, a shocking discovery, and a cryptic note that left more questions than answers. To this day, Timothy's fate remains unknown, one that continues to haunt his family, his community, and the investigators who've spent more than a decade searching for the truth. Today, we're diving into the baffling and heartbreaking disappearance of Timmothy Pitzen. This is the Evidence Board Podcast, and I'm your host, Alicia Wallace. Disclaimer: this episode discusses topics that may be disturbing to some listeners, including suicide, child endangerment, and mental health struggles. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The information presented is based on publicly available sources and is intended for educational and storytelling purposes only. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Before marrying James Pitzen, Amy Joan Marie Fry had already endured a complicated and at times turbulent personal life. According to multiple reports, she had been through 3 failed marriages and had attempted suicide on 2 separate occasions. While her family acknowledged that Amy struggled with her mental health, they characterized her challenges as relatively mild, persistent but manageable. Amy had a deep love for children, though she was convinced she never wanted any of her own. Her first suicide attempt took place before she met James. In a moment of crisis, Amy parked her car on railroad tracks, but in a last-minute decision that likely saved her life, she changed her mind and checked herself into a mental health facility. The second attempt occurred during her relationship with James. After a heated argument, Amy reportedly took a large dose of sleeping pills and fell from a cliff at a nearby park. She suffered a broken bone in her back and remained hospitalized for over 2 weeks. She had laid alone at the bottom of the ravine for hours, developing hypothermia, before a passerby happened to find her and call for help. Had she not been discovered when she was, Amy likely wouldn't have survived. Later in life, Amy experienced a profound personal shift when she converted to Mormonism. While the reason for her conversion remains unclear, it marked a turning point, one that would eventually lead her to James Pitzen. James, known to most as Jim, had always dreamed of having a big family, but at just 21 years old, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and although he beat cancer, doctors told him he would never be able to father any children of his own due to his chemotherapy treatments. In his 30s, he met Amy Fry, and the connection was immediate. Both had accepted that children weren't in their future, and in many ways, that made them feel like the perfect match. But then, the unexpected happened. Amy became pregnant. The news shocked them both, but it was seen as a miracle. They married when Amy was 4 months along and settled into a home in Aurora, Illinois. On October 18th, 2004, Amy gave birth to their son, Timothy James Pitzen. He was named after Amy's brother, Timothy, who tragically died at birth. For Amy and Jim, Timothy was nothing short of a miracle. Neither of them had planned for parenthood, but once Timothy arrived, everything changed. Amy and Timothy shared an unbreakable bond. She was his safe place, and he was her entire world. Described by family members as a mama's boy, Timothy was bright, adventurous, and full of life. He had a daredevil streak, but he was also taught basic safety. He knew not to speak to strangers and had memorized both his phone number and home address. From the outside, the Pitzen family appeared to be happy and tightly knit. Timothy, just 6 years old and in kindergarten at the time of his disappearance, seemed to be a well-loved child with a bright future. But behind closed doors, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. While Amy and Timothy shared a strong relationship, things between Amy and James had become strained. Their marriage was going through a rough patch. According to those close to them, Amy had recently connected with one of her ex-husbands, a decision that understandably did not sit well with James. In response, he issued a serious ultimatum: if the contact continued, he would file for divorce and fight for full custody of Timothy. The morning of May 11th, 2011 began like any other for 6-year-old Timothy Pitzen. His father, James Pitzen, who was 39 at the time, joined his wife Amy, who was 43, in the routine drop-off at Greenman Elementary School in Aurora, Illinois. At 7:45 a.m., James told his son that he loved him and to be good. He then watched as Timothy, full of energy, darted toward his kindergarten teacher, swinging his Spider-Man backpack from side to side with the carefree joy only a child can know. It would be the last time James Pitzen would ever see his son. Afterward, James dropped Amy off at work just a few blocks away before heading into his own office. But within 20 minutes of Amy arriving to work, Amy told her coworkers she wasn't feeling well and decided to leave for the day. However, she didn't go home. Instead, she walked to Timothy's school. At approximately 8:30 a.m., Amy Fry Pitzen signed her son out of class. She told the school staff that there had been a family emergency. There was no alarm raised. It seemed like any other parent picking up their child unexpectedly. From there, Amy and Timothy walked home and got into her vehicle and began driving toward Brookfield Zoo, located more than 30 minutes away. Not long into the drive, Amy noticed her alternator light had come on. By 10 a.m., she pulled into a local auto repair shop and left the car to be serviced. An employee from the shop offered them a ride to the zoo, a generous but otherwise ordinary gesture. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a spontaneous day off, a surprise zoo trip with mom. Meanwhile, James Pitzen returned to Greenman Elementary around 10:30 a.m. to pick Timothy up from his half-day kindergarten class, only to learn that his son had been checked out by his mother. No one had informed him of any kind of family emergency, and in a panic, James began calling Amy, who would not pick up her phone. James began retracing Amy's steps. He checked their home, he went to Amy's workplace, but there was no sign of either of them. At their home, James noticed her Ford Expedition was missing, but oddly, her suitcase was still inside. Hoping for answers, he called Amy's sister, Kara, who tried to reassure him. She told James that Amy was probably just blowing off some steam and would be back home soon. It wasn't entirely out of character. According to Amy's family, she had a tendency to go off the grid when overwhelmed. She'd disappear for a few days, take a trip, and use the time to clear her mind. But she had never taken Timothy with her beforehand, and even during those breaks, she typically stayed in contact with James. The timing also raised red flags. Just a week earlier, the couple had been arguing about a last-minute girls' trip Amy had taken to the Bahamas, one James hadn't approved of. Their relationship had been tense. Inside the house, James began searching for any clue that might tell him where they'd gone. Knowing Amy's history of depression, he checked the medicine cabinet, and what he found only deepened his concern. 2 full bottles of Wellbutrin and Lexapro untouched. Not only had Amy not taken her medication with her, it appeared she hadn't been taking it at all. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., Amy returned to the repair shop to pick up her Ford Expedition, still not having reached out to James. From there, she and Timothy headed north to one of his favorite places, Key Lime Cove Resort in Gurnee, Illinois, a water park they had visited together before. The resort, now known as Great Wolf Lodge, became their first overnight stop. The next day, May 12th, Amy and Timothy continued their unexpected road trip, traveling 163 miles north to the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. Along the way, credit card records show they made a few casual stops. Around 11 a.m., they visited a Shopko where Amy purchased toys and clothes, items that seemed perfectly normal. Just a few hours later, around 2 p.m., they stopped again at a Quick Trip gas station off Interstate 94 in Johnson Creek, Wisconsin, fueling up and grabbing a few drinks. The two checked into the Kalahari Resort and stayed the night. Surveillance footage from the hotel the next morning, May 13th, shows Amy and Timothy checking out at 10 a.m. Before checking out, they had breakfast, and by all appearances, it was just another fun getaway for a mother and young son. But when they left the resort that morning, it would be the last time Timothy was ever seen on camera. From there, they got back on the road, this time headed south, back toward Illinois. At this point, it had been roughly 24 hours since James had last heard from his wife or son. Fearing for their safety, he contacted authorities. Their names were immediately entered into the National Law Enforcement Database, and missing persons alerts were distributed across the country. Posters described Timothy as approximately 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighing around 70 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing green shorts, a t-shirt, tennis shoes, and his signature Spider-Man backpack. Amy was described as standing around 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing roughly 180 pounds, also with brown hair and brown eyes. On May 13th, sometime between noon and 1:30 p.m., Amy began making phone calls to family members, but first to the police. She told them that she was fine, and so was Timothy. Then she spoke with her mother and brother-in-law, Chuck, insisting that she and Timothy were safe and not in any danger, and Tim can be heard in the background. She told Chuck, quote, "Tim is my son. I can do what I want with him. Don't you trust me?" End quote. She assured him that she would never hurt herself or her son. And in a separate call to her mother, Amy said everything was fine and that she just wanted some quality time with Timothy and that the two would be home in a day or two. Those calls were later traced to a rural area northwest of Sterling, Illinois, near Route 40. It was a location where Amy had no known connections. During one of the phone calls, Timothy could be heard in the background saying he was hungry, but neither he nor Amy seemed to be in any distress. Cell phone data showed that from there, Amy had driven nearly 170 miles along the Rock River towards Sterling before her phone was shut off. What happened in the hours after remains a mystery. Later that evening at 7:25 p.m. on May 13th, Amy was captured alone on surveillance footage at a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, Illinois. Timothy was not with her. Amy purchased just a few simple items, a pen, a notepad, and a pack of envelopes. 35 minutes later, she appeared again on camera at a nearby Sullivan's grocery store. Once again, she was alone. This time, she bought milk and crackers. What stood out to investigators, aside from Timothy's absence, was that Amy was wearing an entirely different outfit than she had been seen in earlier that morning. At the Kalahari Resort, she had been dressed in a white shirt and brown capri pants, clothing that has never been recovered. But on the evening surveillance footage, she was wearing a black top and shorts. Later that evening at 11:15 p.m. on May 13th, Amy checked into the Rockford Inn, located at 909 11th Street in Rockford, Illinois, and she was still alone. Sometime that night, or possibly the following morning, Amy Fry Pitzen died by suicide. She had taken a lethal dose of antihistamines and inflicted deep wounds into her wrists and neck. On May 14th, just after noon, a housekeeper at the Rockford Inn knocked on the door of room 108, registered under Amy Fry Pitzen. When there was no answer, she opened the door to check inside. The security chain was latched from within, but through the small opening, she saw something that made her step back in horror. She immediately called the police. When investigators arrived, they forced entry into the room and discovered Amy's body. She had died by suicide and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Beside her was a handwritten note, one that has never been publicly released in full. In the note, Amy apologized for what she called the mess she had created, but the most chilling line of all was directed at the person not found in that room, 6-year-old Timothy. Amy wrote that he was safe and in the care of people who would love and protect him, but she ended with a devastating message. Timothy would never be found, and he hasn't been. In the hotel room, there was no sign of the boy. No Spider-Man backpack, no clothing, no toys. None of the items Amy had bought for him during their days on the road were in the room. It was as if he had simply vanished. The only trace of Timothy that investigators recovered were 2 items: a matching children's t-shirt from the Brookfield Zoo and some over-the-counter children's medication. And just like that, what started as a mysterious disappearance became something much darker, an agonizing mystery with a single haunting clue: Amy's final words. After discovering Amy's body, investigators made their way to James Pitzen's home to ask him a few routine questions, mainly about his whereabouts the night before. James told them he had spent the evening at home, had a few beers, and eventually fell asleep on the couch. Then came the moment that would change his life forever. Investigators informed James that Amy had been found deceased in a hotel room, and Timothy, his 6-year-old son, was missing. There was no sign of him, no explanation, just a heartbreaking absence that offered more questions than answers. After Amy Fry Pitzen's death, investigators quickly began piecing together the timeline of her final days and searching desperately for any trace of the 6-year-old boy. Inside the Rockford Inn, they located the knife Amy had used to take her own life, and forensic analysis confirmed that only her blood was present. But when police searched her SUV, they made a more troubling discovery: a significant amount of blood belonging to Timothy. Although the finding initially raised red flags, family members, including James, were quick to explain that Timothy had experienced a bad nosebleed in the car just weeks prior, and they believed that was likely the source of the blood. Still, investigators pushed forward. A forensic examination of Amy's vehicle revealed that it had been parked in a grassy, rural area, possibly near a stream or a body of water, and close to a highway. Clumps of long weeds and dirt were lodged under the rear bumper, suggesting she had backed into a field or a meadow. Based on the soil and plant matter, scientists concluded that Amy had likely stopped on a wide gravel shoulder or side road adjacent to an asphalt secondary highway treated with glass road marking beads. The location was open, with few trees, though birch and oak trees were noted nearby. Queen Anne's lace and black mustard plants were likely growing in the area, and forensic botanists believe there may have been a pond, creek, or a small stream nearby. All signs pointed to a remote area somewhere in northwest Illinois, but a precise location has never been determined. Adding to the mystery, Amy's iPass toll records revealed she had made 2 trips to the Sterling, Illinois area earlier that year, once in February and again in March. This was the same general area where her final phone calls to family were traced. Investigators considered the possibility that she had been scouting out a location, either to secretly place Timothy in someone's care or, in a more tragic scenario, to dispose of his body. But no concrete evidence has ever been found to support either theory. Authorities searched Amy's financial records and computers for any trace of an underground adoption or plan to transfer custody. They came up empty. Massive search efforts followed. Flyers were distributed, helicopters scanned open fields, officers and search dogs combed through areas in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Despite the intensity of the effort, nothing turned up. One key item, however, remained missing, and that was Amy's cell phone. In the days after her death, 2 letters from Amy arrived in the mail, one addressed to her mother, the other to a close friend. In the handwritten notes, Amy expressed her deep sorrow. She wrote that she had never felt like she truly belonged in this world, and that for a long time, she believed she was meant to be with Timothy. But in the end, not even that was enough to keep her going. In the months that followed, numerous sightings were reported across the country, but none of them panned out. In December 2011, someone claimed to have seen a boy matching Timothy's description at a Denny's restaurant in North Aurora. Police tracked down the car that the boy was seen in, but the child was not Timothy. A month earlier, a separate report placed him in Massachusetts, but that too was a dead end. Another tip emerged that same year. A woman sitting at a fast food restaurant overheard a group of children and believed one of the boys looked exactly like Timothy, but she waited 2 days before reporting it. By then, the opportunity to verify the sighting had passed. Timothy's aunt, Kara Jacobs, later shared a cautionary message. Quote, "If you think you see somebody who is missing, you need to say something when you see them and not think about it later. You don't have to be confrontational or approach anyone. Just call the police and report it, because time is of the essence. We'll never know if that little boy was Tim, and it's almost been 14 years without him now." End quote. In 2013, 2 years after Timothy's disappearance, a break in the case seemed possible when Amy's missing cell phone was discovered along Illinois Route 78, just north of Mount Carroll. But the find ultimately led nowhere, and it held no new evidence. A year later, in 2014, a woman in Rockton, Illinois, reported that a young boy who resembled Timothy had appeared at her garage sale. She made the connection after seeing an age-progressed photo released by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children showing what Timothy might have looked like at age 9. The boy at the center of the tip was never identified. Then, in 2019, a new lead made national headlines. On April 3rd, residents in Newport, Kentucky called the police to report a teenage boy wandering the streets. He was visibly shaken, emaciated, and in bad condition, and he had told officers that he had just escaped from captivity, claiming to be Timmothy Pitzen. The next day, hopes were crushed when DNA testing confirmed that he was not Timothy. He was a 23-year-old named Brian Michael Reaney, a recently released convict from Ohio with a long history of mental illness. He had served time for burglary and vandalism and had previously been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and bipolar disorder. In federal court, Reaney admitted to the hoax and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Despite the years and the countless false leads, Timothy's family has never given up hope. In 2024, on the 13th anniversary of his disappearance, James Pitzen shared a message through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Quote, "Dear Timothy, the years apart have been hard. I am so looking forward to us being reunited. There is so much of your young life I have not been able to be a part of while you've been missing. The future is bright, and I look forward to spending time with you and getting to know my son again. Till I see you again. Love, Dad." End quote. To this day, Timothy James Pitzen remains missing. No arrests have been made and no suspects officially named. Just a trail of fragments, questions, and heartbreak, and a family that continues to hold on to hope. Despite the years of uncertainty, one belief continues to anchor James Pitzen and many others who loved Timothy. They believe he's still alive. James has never accepted the idea that his wife, Amy, took their son's life. Instead, he firmly believes that Amy gave Timothy to someone she trusted to raise him, someone who has kept him hidden all these years. Timothy's aunt, Jen West, shares that hope. In an interview, she said, quote, "I've never allowed myself to believe that we're never going to find him, even though we may not. I believe he is okay and out there living somewhere. He probably doesn't even know who he really is, but he's an adult now, and I've always had the thought that maybe something would happen. Maybe a memory would pop up and start a chain reaction in his mind to help him realize, and I still think that's the most likely way we'll get him back." End quote. James has long rejected the theory that what happened was a murder-suicide. Others in the family agree. Kara Jacobs, Amy's sister, said, quote, "Not for 1 second did I think Timothy was in danger. It never occurred to me. They were practically inseparable. It was the one thing I thought, wow, Amy was meant to be a mom. This was what Amy was meant to do." End quote. James' mother, Linda Pitzen, Timothy's grandmother, echoes that same conviction. Quote, "It's the not knowing that's so hard, not knowing if he's alive or dead. But I still can't believe that Amy killed him because I don't think she did. She wouldn't have done that. He was everything to her. I believe he's out there somewhere, and he's at the age now, depending on the situation, where he might start questioning things." End quote. Some family members believe the seeds of this disappearance were planted after James threatened divorce. With Amy's mental health history likely to come up in court, some speculate she feared she'd lose custody and decided to act before anything could happen. Jen West and Linda Pitzen have both expressed a belief that Amy's religious beliefs may be the key to understanding what happened. Amy had converted to Mormonism later in life and was the only member of her family who practiced the faith. Jen believes Amy may have arranged for Timothy to be raised within a religious community, possibly even in secret. Jen said, quote, "Amy was the only Mormon in our family, and I think she wanted Tim to be raised within the church. It's the only thing I can think of that is plausible. Where else can you go where nobody recognizes you and you can stay hidden? We think he was told something like, something happened to your parents and you're going to live with us now. I think he's in Mexico with one of these communities that protects their own. I don't have proof, of course, but it's just a gut feeling," end quote. Kara Jacobs also tried to retrace Amy's steps in the final days before her death. She studied Amy's iPass records and noted the multiple trips to Sterling, Illinois, an area Amy had no ties to. Kara believed Amy may have been scouting off potential drop-off points. She also recalled a stretch of highway, Route 20, near Highway 78, that Amy would have recognized from childhood. It was a road they traveled together often while visiting family in Iowa. Kara believes Amy may have made her final phone calls near Sterling, said her goodbyes, and then drove north into Iowa, where she handed Timothy off to another family. To this day, none of these theories have been confirmed, but for Timothy's family, they offer the one thing that's hardest to hold on to when years stretch into decades: hope. If you have any information about the disappearance of Timmothy Pitzen, even the smallest detail, you are urged to contact the Aurora Police Department at 630-256-5516. Timothy may go by the nickname Tim or Timmy. If you believe you saw him, his mother, or anyone who may have been with them around the time of his disappearance, or if you know something that could help investigators, you are strongly encouraged to come forward. No detail is too small. After more than a decade, Timothy's family still holds on to hope, and you could be the missing piece. This case is one of the most frustrating ones I've ever looked into, not because of what we know, but because of how much we don't. After all these years, there are still so few concrete answers, and the trail feels as cold as it is confusing. Personally, I believe Amy handed Timothy off to someone, likely near Sterling, Illinois, or possibly across the border in Iowa, and the theory that he may have ended up in a religious compound, especially given Amy's conversion to Mormonism and isolation from her family in that regard, makes sense to me. But like every theory in this case, it's just that, a theory. There's very little hard evidence pointing definitively in that direction. I also found myself wanting to dig deeper into Amy's past relationships, especially her former husbands. I wondered whether any of them had ever been thoroughly looked into, but considering this case made national headlines and was investigated by multiple agencies, I have to believe that law enforcement combed through everyone connected to Amy and Timothy. And that's what makes it so hard. We are left with scattered clues, a lot of maybes, and a little boy who simply vanished. And after more than a decade, the only thing stronger than the mystery is the hope that one day Timothy will find his way home, or someone will come forward with the piece that finally solves this puzzle. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the case. Do you think he's still out there? What theory makes the most sense to you? Let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new case. If you prefer the audio version, you can listen to every full episode on Spotify, and if you are listening there right now, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars. It helps me keep bringing these stories to light. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, where I post bite-sized clips and updates on each case throughout the week. If you haven't seen last week's episode yet, make sure to check that one out too. It's definitely one you don't want to miss. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop seeking the truth.